Commissioner, of course, there's been concern about whether terrorism is here to stay. Is this the new normal, if you will? Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, was really castigated for saying that it's part and parcel with living in a major city. And of course, you don't want to look at it that way. If we are to at least mitigate some of the risks of terrorism, what would that look like and how do we even go about that?
Well, it is a sad fact that, of course, in the last few years we've had terrorist attacks in the United Kingdom, we've had them elsewhere in Europe, we've had them here in Kenya. This is a global threat that we all face. But these guys are attacking our way of life, and I think the worst response to that is to go into our shells, is to stop going out for dinner with our friends, to stop going to the shops. That's what they want. And so, yes, we have to stand strong with those who are affected. We stand strong with each other as we work against terrorism, but we've also got to make sure this doesn't change our way of life.
Right.
Balozi, and it's not your call, but obviously a lot of Kenyans are wondering now that the latest attack on the capital, should we expect a travel warning in the next few days, next few weeks?
Well, we've been keeping our travel advice updated, but we have not changed the level of our travel advice through this attack. We've done exactly what we did when France was attacked, when Germany was attacked, which is to inform British travellers of what's going on. Obviously, we've reflected the advice of the local police to stay away from the area when the attack was going on. But we have not said, and I do not expect us to say, that people shouldn't come to Kenya. Kenya's tourism industry is really strong. I know how many people's jobs depend on tourism, and the last thing we want to do is to make that more difficult. So British people are going to carry on coming to Kenya, and they're going to carry on seeing the great things that this country has to offer.
Yeah. I don't know if you were here 5 years ago during Westgate, High Commissioner. You weren't.
No.
But looking back and looking at what happened this week, how would you compare it?
Well, Westgate was much longer, of course. It was that terrible siege of, 4 days, with people trapped inside that mall. And I think some real lessons have been learned in terms of the speed of the response, in terms of the coordination of the response, the way the Kenyan authorities went in with a very clear sense of command and control and dealt with the attack. And I think that reflects some of the lessons that were learned from Westgate. Clearly, they're both tragedies, and it's hard to compare these things, but I think the response has been effective.
Well, let's talk radicalization, which is a huge factor when it comes to terrorism. We're seeing a new face, if you will, of terrorists, homegrown terrorists, if you will. At least two of the attackers from the Riverside attack were Kenyan. And many asking, what does this mean in terms of fighting terror and trying to curb this issue? Of course, in the UK, you have the same issue of some even going over to Syria to fight alongside ISIS forces. How are you dealing with this new dynamic as the British government, and what lessons can we learn as Kenyans?
I think one of the things is it's just so hard to understand why people would do this. For almost everybody, the idea that you might adapt some kind of ideology that makes you want to blow yourself up in order to kill not some soldier you're fighting against, but just innocent people in a hotel. Most of us find that really hard to understand. So how you deal with that in terms of radicalization is really difficult. And it's a challenge that we face in the UK, as you say. It's a challenge that you face in Kenya. I don't have a single answer to it. We're all wrestling with it. But I think one of the big answers is about communities pulling together. It's about spotting those young men or young women who are in some way heading off, troubled. It's about working with parents and families to try to bring those people back into the fold. It's about working with community leaders and trying to get everyone to play a part as a community in nipping these things in the bud.
Yeah, High Commissioner, when I worked for the international networks, we used to have something called hostile environment training. Now, in the UK, I don't know whether there are lessons, there are classes that people take, because, for instance, when that first terrorist blew himself up, I think the reason, or some people are saying, they were expecting people to run towards them and then they start opening fire. Are there lessons that people are taught in the UK that when you hear certain sounds, this is what you do, or stuff like that, that awareness, so that you don't run towards the trouble and you run away from it?
So what we get taught is run, hide, tell. So if you can run away, and you're right, don't run towards it, run away. If you can't run away safely, then hide. And people did, of course, hide in the Dusit complex and were able to protect themselves. And as soon as you safely can, tell somebody about it. So turn your phone off, turn your phone to silent, but use text or WhatsApp or whatever you're using to tell someone what's going on where you are. That's generally the best advice I think that people can give.
Yeah.
And what do you make of Al-Shabaab's approach? It started off with tourist abductions and then moved on to attacks on buses, transportation vehicles, and then, of course, now they're using various political tones as to why they're doing this. Of course, they said the reason they attacked Riverside is because of Trump's decision to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But what do you make of that? Because they're using external factors but carrying out attacks on Kenyan soil. What does that mean now for us and even a country like the UK as well?
Well, as I said, I find it really hard to understand why people would go and blow themselves up in a hotel. I think most of us find that really hard to understand. I don't think it's about any decisions that somebody took. I think there's something very fundamentally wrong that's going on there that we have to combat. But of course this goes back to Somalia, and Kenyan forces are fighting very bravely in Somalia against Al-Shabaab. We have a small military contingent there supporting that. Other nations from around the region are fighting. And that's because we want a stable Somalia. We want a Somalia where people have democracy and stability and can build their businesses and their lives. And Al-Shabaab doesn't want that. So I think it's trying to hit back. As I say, I don't fully understand the motivations of these people, but it's trying to hit back where they think it hurts. But I don't think it has hurt. I mean, it's hurt tragically the people involved. But if you look at the resolve of the Kenyan people, the resolve of the Kenyan government to continue that fight against Al-Shabaab, I think that's stronger after this week, not weaker.
Yeah, President Uhuru Kenyatta a few weeks ago reiterated the fact that Kenyan troops will remain in Somalia for the foreseeable future. Would it be a mistake to pull out, High Commissioner, in your thinking, would it be a mistake?
Well, it's a decision for the Kenyan president, of course, what the Kenyan forces do. But we certainly hope that Kenya will stay the course. We're working with Kenya to stay the course. We're training troops alongside Kenya to make them more effective. When our Prime Minister was here last August, she announced extra funding for the Kenyan Defence Forces in Somalia to support that effort. She visited a centre where we're training Kenyan forces on how to avoid roadside bombs, which are a big threat now. So we're doing an awful lot to try to support Kenya in that fight. We recognise how hard this is. Our own troops have fought in Afghanistan, for example, where I've served in the past against terrorists there, trying to stabilise the country. And this takes a long time and it takes sacrifice. But I think Kenya will stay the course, and I just want to pay tribute to the bravery of everyone who's out there fighting in that environment.
Absolutely.
All right, High Commissioner, thank you so much for your time and coming in and shedding light on this larger global problem called terrorism. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.